Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't understand it, though, because most of you couldn't have been born when I was on the screen. So I'm very heartened that I still have that kind of response. I want to thank you for allowing me to share this platform today with so many incredible, innovative, and illustrious speakers that you're having. I struggled with what I was going to talk about today. Up to last night, I was going, well, I know that it's something to do with empowerment, and it's something to do with self-sustainability. You know, I had all these brilliant notions, but now to decide how I'm going to focus it was the struggle. So I came back to basics because I have a wonderful mentor, Japanese gentleman called Daisaku Ikeda, and he is extraordinary. I mean, he has a vast array of talents, and what he's achieved, I can't even begin to articulate. And people were with him, and he's now 80-something, but he's still going. And people were with him, and they said, you know, what is it? What do you do? How is it that you keep going? And he said, well, most people, they are thinking or worried about the past, or they're thinking or worrying about the future. I'm always in the present. So I was totally inspired by that. And last night, I had the privilege of being with these illustrious speakers, many of whom you're still going to hear from, and the ideas start to formulate in my mind. So I'm going to share with you Rise Up and Walk, and what that means to me. Now, Rise Up and Walk, at the moment, and that's why it was so interesting hearing Dr. Peach, because I've started a festival in Johannesburg, and it is a youth festival of the arts. And it is about breaking into those theatrical spaces and kind of demonstrating that many, many things can come out of theatrical spaces. Because what's happening a lot in Johannesburg is that the theaters are not being, you know, they've become elitist, a bit like education, actually. So I thought there's got to be a way of marrying the arts and education in those spaces. So you've really excited me because I'm only just starting, but I'm going, oh my word, it's a trend. So the reason I called it Rise Up and Walk is because I'm very inspired by the late Wangari Maathai, who is the first African woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize. And she was a great environmentalist. And her passion was education and self-sustainability. So I thought, yeah, and she was talking about it in terms of business and agriculture, but I thought that same principle can happen in the arts. But I'm not going to talk about that project. I'm going to take the theme of Rise Up and Walk and share that with you in the hope that you will be inspired, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, to rise up and walk, to know that, you know, wherever you've been, and at that point when you feel that you can't go on, that's the point that you got to get up. But when you get up, you can't just stand still. You've got to walk, right? So when I step back and I look at what I describe, the crazy conundrum that was my life, especially my creative life, I realized that what was really important was identifying my passion. And I think often when you identify your passion, it often becomes your mission. But I also think, as young Gil said earlier, that sometimes it's when you're absolutely broken that you begin to awaken to whatever that mission or passion might be. I don't know why that is. I don't know why you have to crash, and crash royally before you wake up, you know? But it makes you wake up. And I found that having a passion is, in fact, the most wonderful thing, because to have a reason to get up in the morning. There's nothing like that. And that passion often translates in you being able to encourage and empower others, because that becomes natural. Your desire to share your power is actually a natural human action. It is inherent. So it is the opposite when often we are made to think that human beings are inherently self-centered. Actually, it's the opposite. And if you look at human beings in disasters, when you have a disastrous situation, it is amazing how people, without thinking, will help one another. So, and I think it is about having a passion for life. And I found that I developed that. And I realized that it was in facing all of my obstacles and finding solutions for them, I suddenly was aware of the infinite possibilities that are available to me. And I'm going to repeat that. I became aware of the infinite possibilities that were available to me. And I knew that while I was alive, while I was breathing, I could do anything. And I absolutely could change the impossible into the possible, whatever that was. Thank you. One of the things that came from my awakening was to write a book. Some of you may have heard of it. It's called Dancing to the Beat of the Drum. And it really is an autobiography about my experiences of being a household name here in South Africa. Because, I was born in Ethiopia in exile. My parents were exiled in the 50s. I came back, and overnight, I became this household name. But I was always in this state of flux, and it suddenly became about my identity. So having been in the UK and worked as an artist, and always feeling marginalized because I was, black and female, and in my days, because actually I was born way before Gil. I know you'd never tell, right? I look amazing. But I like you, whoever did that. But the amazing thing about that is that at that time, Britain in the 80s, really, black actresses were kind of not in anyone's radar. So, I was going through all of that, and then I come to South Africa in the 90s, and lo and behold, I'm still a foreigner. And what I didn't realize, that was beginning to eat into my psyche, was beginning to eat into my consciousness, and my self-esteem was beginning to deteriorate. But I didn't know how it was going to manifest. I grew up with a sense of being the outsider, and I always felt that, I could never get into this club that's created, this club of successful people. Why can't I be in there, was my feeling. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that, where you're always feeling that, why is it that it's happening in there, and why can't I get into that room, right? Yeah, I know. And so I started to make really bad choices, obviously, because, that's that wonderful thing, is if you internally are feeling negative, you internally are feeling disempowered, then that will reflect in every area of your life. So everything will come into your life to confirm that, yes, you're a loser, right? And I ended up getting involved in a very negative marriage, and the brother eventually used to introduce me to, he was a brother, I'm afraid. He began to introduce me to girlfriends and telling me that he was a polygamist. But all the women are going, and the men are going, and? It's interesting. But at the end of the day, whether he was a polygamist or not, the point was, where was I? Because I was desperately trying to understand this. I mean, why? I was desperately trying to examine this idea that, it's because I've got this foreign status that I'm not respecting my African traditions. I've got to try and understand. And of course, that was totally being thrown at me. It was like, yeah, you're sort of English. You've lost your way. So that was, in fact, the question. Why wasn't I asking, why is this happening? Why wasn't I going back to self and saying, but how do I feel about this? No, I didn't do that. But I'd got to the point of not being able to navigate my life. And it was at the time when I was at the height of my career. I was in Sikhi generations, adored by many, it would seem. But I had no idea of who I was, where I was going, what my life meant. So actually, when from the outside, people were looking at me and going, oh, wow, that's what success looks like. Because yes, I was financially stable, I was in every magazine, I was on covers, I was on TV, it looked as if my life was huge. But in fact, it was very, 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 very small. And inside, I felt very small. And I actually was in a place where fame and money was meaningless. It had nothing to do with my life or my happiness or my reason for living. And if anything, I started to shun the idea of life. I began to despise life. I didn't want to live. So what was happening is, I've said here, and I will read this, I heard in my own head that I was not good enough. I didn't hear the stuff about you're successful, you're winning. I heard that I wasn't good enough. I wanted to be an international success, right? The best I could do was to be a soap opera actress in South Africa. I heard that I wasn't beautiful, that I didn't dress well, that I wasn't exciting, that I wasn't that talented. And the list goes on and on and on. I heard every single negative voice from within my life. And I was completely deaf to the fact that, to the point where I was unable to look at my strengths. So I wasn't seeing that I was winning awards every 5 minutes. I wasn't seeing that I was acting opposite Idris Elba. Yeah, I knew it. I threw that in deliberately. I wasn't seeing that, there were young women who were sort of looking up to me, who had felt invisible like me. And because of my being out there, they suddenly were made to feel that they were visible because there was someone who looked like them that was out there. I wasn't seeing that. I didn't see any of that. All I saw is that I hated my life. I wasn't taking care of business. And as I was mentioning earlier, what's happening internally is that if you continue to set your goal, that goal may not necessarily be positive. I set my goal that I was invisible, that I was unhappy, that there was a waste of space, that I am a failure. So guess what? My life responded. And it said, okay, if that's what we see ourselves as, let's be that thing. And what happened with that is that I continued to spiral completely out of control. And as the marriage went disastrously wrong, I began to just shun my life. So, sometimes we die without actually being a corpse. You can be a living corpse. And that's what happened to me. And this culminated in me losing all my wealth. I lost everything. I ended up living in the streets of Johannesburg, ended up in a car. I had no money, I had no pride, because it wasn't as if I was anonymous and living in a car. I was in Sikhi and living in a car, selling food, selling clothes. So my sense of self had completely diminished. Yet, it was, in fact, one of the best periods of my life, because it was at that point that everything started to shift and turn. Because what I realized is I have nothing else. So all these things that I had linked to my identity were gone, but I was still standing. So as long as I was alive, I had to do something about it. And what I developed in that period was faith. And it was faith in the human spirit, because I came across unimaginable compassion from those people in the streets. And by the time I met my mentor, Daisaku Ikeda, who is a man who lives with infinite courage, infinite compassion, and infinite wisdom, I thought I recognized that because I met it through other human beings. And I thought that's actually the power of our existence, the interconnectedness between one another, the relationships we have as human beings. I personally think there is no other gift. And out of that can arise so many, many beautiful things, you know, and the choice is yours. And when I remember those people, I do feel rather emotional, because they gave me my reason to live. They inspired me, they mentored me. And brick by brick, I was able to put my life back together. And it's not as if I am free of self-doubt now. No, not at all. It's not as if I don't fail, you know, from time to time, maybe often. But I am resilient. And actually, what I find is that the foundations that I am now placing in my life are ironclad. And nothing is going to move me. Nothing. And that, thank you. And that is what I have to offer you as young, extraordinary, uniquely fantastic individuals. I don't know what any of you are doing, but I can tell you that each one has something incredibly unique to offer the world. We're all here for a reason. All we have to do is find it and then use that reason to empower and encourage ourselves and others. So the Rise Up and Walk thingy, is there the next one? This is the, well, I don't know where it is, but there it is. There's a poster of it, and that's a culmination of everything. It's a culmination of all one's elements that have come in one's life. And that, I feel, is the purpose of living. And I believe that we're all living and breathing entities of the universe. And for that reason alone, you are worthy of respect. Please remember that. And we're all interconnected. And knowing, therefore, to take responsibility for the self means that you automatically take responsibility for the collective. And so, I did fall, I did rise, and I'm still walking. Thank you.